Well, The Dark Knight Rises, the highly anticipated follow-up to The Dark Knight, and the final movie in the supposed Dark Knight trilogy. Both Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale have stated on multiple times that this will be their last hurrah in terms of making Batman movies. They don't want to make any more. Not that they did not enjoy doing it. Not that they didn't enjoy putting their own unique stamp on it. But they're done. They are stopping at 3. Okay, so the movie. One thing I noticed is that much in the way of how Batman Begins took inspiration from Batman Year One. This one takes strong inspiration both visually and in terms of storyline from Nightfall and The Dark Knight Returns. It takes place about 8 years after The Dark Knight, under the supposed Dent Act, which was formed after Harvey Dent's supposed murder by the Batman. Yeah, murder by the Batman. Um, the city, or at least Gordon and Batman covered up Harvey's crimes as Two-Face to make him again this martyr figure, and the city was spurred into action. And under the Dent Act, the streets have been almost completely cleaned up of criminals. They have, I mean, there's literally an army of criminals in Blackgate Penitentiary who were imprisoned there under the Dent Act with no parole. However, Gordon feels very empty because he has essentially been living a lie for 8 years. And Bruce Wayne has actually become a recluse. He is after the fall he took in saving Gordon's kids from Harvey Dent at the end of The Dark Knight. He is now a cripple. I mean, he has extensive scar tissue. He has extensive internal damage. So he's essentially walking around his house. He almost never comes out of his mansion. No one ever sees him. No one has seen him for 8 years. He still tries to help the city by throwing various fundraisers and parties and whatnot. But he's essentially become this Howard Hughes type character where people are like have you ever seen Wayne? Not in 8 years. I mean, he's probably got like 8-inch nails and he's probably pissing in mason jars. However, when this mysterious thief comes after Bruce Wayne's fingerprints, Batman is called back into action. However, he gets more than he bargained for when he comes across a mercenary named Bane, who has some very dark plans for the city. All right. This was the movie in the entire trilogy. This was the movie that I think had people the most split. Some people really like it, some people don't. I do think this is where they took the most liberties with the character. I think this is where okay, there's a very visible line between what the comic book fans want and what the comic book fans feel is appropriate, and what the filmmakers feel is appropriate for this particular interpretation of the character. Me personally, just judging it as a movie, I really liked it. I didn't like it quite as much as the first two, but I still think it's a worthy conclusion to the Dark Knight trilogy. And for a long time, there was speculation on who the villains were going to be. I mean, were they going to get Catwoman? Were they going to get Philip Seymour Hoffman as the Penguin? I was stupid back then because I was saying, maybe it's going to be Killer Croc. Killer Croc wouldn't really work in this type of setting. When I heard the villains were going to be Bane and Catwoman, I said, "Really? Bane and Catwoman?" And what's more, Catwoman was going to be played by Anne Hathaway, who up until that point I had primarily known her for comedies and dramas. I had mainly known her as Anne Hathaway. She's in everything. She's Hollywood's little sweetheart. And in addition, Tom Hardy was going to play Bane. British actor Tom Hardy was going to play Bane, who is predominantly Spanish. Already, some pretty weird casting. Okay, so how does the cast do? Well, as always, the huge cast is used very well. Christian Bale gives a powerhouse final performance as Bruce Wayne. You see a very world-weary Bruce Wayne in this one, very different from the previous incarnations. Batman Begins, he was very angry, he was energetic, he was a little brash. Dark Knight, he was a little bit more subdued. He grew a little bit more as a person, and in this one he is just tired. Physically and emotionally, he is just tired, and Bale plays that very well. Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman are still very sympathetic and very heartbreaking at times as surrogate father figures Alfred and Lucius Fox. In fact, Michael Caine gives probably his best performance in the series as Alfred. Let's see, Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I really liked not just the costume, but also her performance. She apparently took inspiration from Hedy Lamarr. While I do think that it's not as much of a risk, she doesn't really take as many risks as Michelle Pfeiffer did. I think Anne Hathaway, or I know Anne Hathaway, is a little bit closer to the comics because she's this. She really plays well this sultry thief who has this hidden backstory. Anne Hathaway, for the longest time, I never really thought she had the necessary edge. She didn't really have that sort of dangerous side to her that I thought was necessary to play Catwoman. But in terms of the physical stuff, and in terms of, again, possessing that dangerous edge, Anne Hathaway did a really good job. She's definitely one of the better screen iterations of Catwoman, maybe even the best. Yes, that's right. I said that I actually like Anne Hathaway's version of Catwoman better than Michelle Pfeiffer. I know I'm going to get disagreements on that, but I think it's a matter of preference, because they each put their own unique stamp on it. You're not going to confuse Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman for Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, so each of them do a good job. Tom Hardy as Bane. When I first heard that Bane was going to be one of the bad guys, I said, really? Because Bane, at least in his comic book iteration, is this big mercenary dude who utilizes this steroid called Venom to basically grow in size and muscle mass instantaneously. So when I heard that he was going to be the villain, I was wondering, how are they going to incorporate Venom into the story, into this more realistic or hyper-realistic take on the Batman mythos? Wouldn't it feel a little bit out of place? Wouldn't it be too cartoonish, a little too comic book-y? But they solved that by taking Venom completely out of the equation. Now you may be thinking, well, doesn't that defeat the purpose of the character? Well, no, because Tom Hardy, and by extension, the character of Bane in this movie, is built like a tank. I was so shocked at how big Tom Hardy was in this movie. He's like 300 pounds of beef. I was surprised at how much he pumped up for this role, and a good thing too, because Bane needs to be big. And when I first saw Tom Hardy in Inception, and even in Warrior he was pretty cut. um, but he wasn't big. He wasn't imposing. Um, so when I heard little Tom Hardy is going to play Bane, really? I mean, Tom Hardy's a really good actor, but Bane, really? But again, he proved me wrong. I really have to stop doubting Christopher Nolan, at least in terms of his casting choices, because you had Heath Ledger. Everyone was skeptical about Heath Ledger as the Joker. He ended up doing a fantastic job. You had Anne Hathaway and Tom Hardy as Catwoman and Bane, and they both did a really good job. And the thing is, I think Tom Hardy has it really hard in this movie, at least in terms of being able to give a good performance, because he has that thing on his face, the face masks, the face mask. Throughout the whole movie, he doesn't get to take that off, save for one scene that lasts about 5 seconds. However, his eyes and his mannerisms and his body language are expressive enough to where you don't necessarily need to see that part of his face. He gives a really charismatic performance without the use of this part of his face, which is very impressive, and that's actually the mark of a really good actor, to be able to pull off a really good performance like that with that type of hindrance. And I really like what they did with Bane in general here, because Bane has always been a pretty intelligent villain, at least in comparison to the rest of Batman's rogues gallery. And like you probably know, they completely missed the mark in Batman and Robin. It was almost like it was a spoof. It was a spoof of not even of Bane, of the Incredible Hulk. As far as I'm concerned, the real Bane was not in Batman and Robin. Bane is in this movie because he's intelligent, he is charismatic, he is while at the same time being very strong. And aside from that, or not really aside, what I really like about having Bane in this movie is that it not only does he test Batman on a mental level, because he is equally as brilliant as Batman, but also he provides a challenge that we have never seen before in this series, which is provide a very physical challenge for Batman. Bane, by all accounts, is stronger than Batman in this movie, and he whoops his butt several times. And those fights are very impactful, because again, with Christian Bale's Batman, we've never actually seen him bested, or at least not in a fight that is this one-sided. So there's that, but also just reimagining Bane as this sort of fascist demagogue, I think was a really smart move, because that makes for a pretty menacing character, someone who can sway people's opinions. I will say this, though. Bane and Catwoman are not really as strong as the Joker and Two-Face in the previous movie. Mainly the Joker. Because the thing with Bane and Catwoman in this movie, as good as they are, and as strong as they are, and as much as I like the interpretations that we see here, there was just something so unsettling about Heath Ledger's Joker. I mean, you never really knew what he was going to do next, and that he had all these creepy mannerisms. You know, he would kind of lick the side of his face and stuff like that. With Bane, he has a very clear-cut goal in mind. The Joker, again, he was completely unpredictable. He was a loose cannon in every sense of the word. So I think from on that level, Bane has sort of this fundamental disadvantage in being compared to the Joker, and I think that was always going to be a problem going into this movie, is that how are they going to top Heath Ledger's Joker? The answer is they don't. But does that make the villains here bad? No, of course not. Like I said, the villains here are very good. Let's see, who else? We have Marion Cotillard as Miranda Tate, this businesswoman who Bruce Wayne trusts with his fortune and his company. and she's very good. She's very mysterious. And once we actually find out the twist, it does actually make some sense because A, this character has been very mysterious up to this point. It actually does make sense from the perspective of what this character has done up to this point, what this character has been able to do. It was even foreshadowed pretty nicely. So the twist, I'm not going to give it away, but the twist, it does kind of detract somewhat from Bane's villainy toward the end. However, I still think it was a pretty good twist, just in general, even though it does sort of detract from Bane. It doesn't destroy the character of Bane, not like Iron Man 3 destroyed the character of the Mandarin. But yeah, the twists, I think there are positives and negatives to it, like I just said. Let's see. Who else? Oh. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a new character. Officer Blake, who's this rookie cop, this brash young guy who eventually becomes sort of a protege, or an unofficial protege, to both Batman and Commissioner Gordon. He's this very driven cop. He's very responsible. He's this orphan, and he eventually figures out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, albeit kind of in a hokey way. But yeah, there's something about him that's just so unlikable. Maybe it's his energy. Maybe it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's very likable presence. Maybe it's the fact that he really finds a great balance between police professionalism and again the brash young rookie side. So yeah, he was a really nice addition. I liked him a lot more than I thought I would. And especially considering that we have not seen him before in this series. He is only in this movie, and I was not complaining that they kept cutting back to him. That's pretty impressive. And I think it's a real credit to Gordon-Levitt's acting ability. Let's see. So the cast all do a fine job. The action scenes are fantastic. Once again, they do not resort to the quick cut, zoomed in so close that you can't see what's going on thing that they did in Batman Begins. They pull back. They do these sweeping shots of Batman fighting Bane. The fights themselves are choreographed very nicely. They look real. They look brutal. They look visceral. They look like these two martial arts masters going at it. And the final battle between all of Bane's thugs and the Gotham City police force is just fantastic. And that actually brings me to something that I have to praise about the trilogy in general, is that each one of these movies feels like a completely different type of movie. The first one was this more spiritual, martial arts-esque flick about, finding Bruce Wayne, finding his identity, finding himself. The second one, The Dark Knight, was this kind of hardcore crime thriller, this hardcore crime ensemble. Whereas this one is kind of like a war movie. It is. It's like this big, huge scale war movie. And all three of them handle their respective types of movie pretty well. However, if there are a few things that I didn't like about this movie, is that even if you have seen the other movies, you will be somewhat caught off guard by the expositional overload that is in the beginning of this movie. This movie, apparently Bruce Wayne sank his entire company on this energy project that he abruptly shut down because he found it too dangerous. He thought that it had the potential to start this kind of nuclear disaster. He thought that the dangers far outweighed the positives, so he basically shut it down. and basically, like I said, sank his entire company to the point where he's getting no profits, to the point where he's broke. That's a lot to take in. Something that significant, a change that significant to the Bruce Wayne character, something that is a fundamental aspect of Bruce Wayne's character, that he is rich. Suddenly taking that away is a lot to swallow, especially in the first half hour. And that's not the only thing they pour on you. There are all of these new characters like Roland Daggett, who I'm glad he dies because he was kind of irritating. There's Miranda Tate. There's Bane. There's Catwoman. There's all these new characters. There are all these reintroductions to these old characters like Gordon and Bruce Wayne. And I think it gets to be a little much, and that's really the weakest part of the movie, in my opinion, is that first half hour, where everything is just being set up. The rest of the movie is great. It's just that first half hour where they're setting everything up and they have to fill you in on everything. It gets to be a little too packed. It doesn't really flow as nicely. The whole movie doesn't really flow as smoothly as The Dark Knight. Even though it is a really good time, it does do a really good job at conveying this grand scope and it does provide a very satisfying ending to the trilogy as a whole. In terms of pacing and in terms of how scenes flow into the next, it's not really as smooth of an experience as The Dark Knight or even Batman Begins. However, overall, The Dark Knight Rises is still a very, very accomplished Batman movie. It takes a lot of risks. I would argue it takes more risks with the character creatively than the other movies did. Specifically in the way of having him quit, and again, some common issues that I've heard brought up about this movie is, Batman, he's not supposed to quit. He's not supposed to do the things he does in this movie. And I said, well, I think having him eventually move on, it was a major theme of the movie of moving on, especially after Rachel Dawes' death in the second one. I think it was all the more difficult for Bruce Wayne to move on, and I think it was all the more rewarding when he finally did move on at the end of this. I've heard that there are plot holes in this movie. Like how did Bruce Wayne, after escaping from the pits, how did he get back to Gotham City? How did he obtain the clean slate that Selina Kyle needs? To which I say, well, you could ask questions about like that. However, there are plot holes in the other movies too. I would argue equally as big. For example, in the first one, when Bruce Wayne set the League of Shadows monastery ablaze, why did none of the ninjas make it out? Why did none of them try to make it out? I mean, you're just telling me that all of them politely waited to be burned up in the fire? Second one, okay. Second one, how did the Joker rig up all of the explosives necessary to completely destroy Gotham General Hospital? So, like I said, the plot holes didn't really bother me. Because, again, the thing with Christopher Nolan is that, yeah, some of his movies do have plot holes, but I think some of that is intentional. I think in Inception, for instance, he doesn't really tell you the specifics, or at least he doesn't really go in depth as to the specifics of how Cobb and his team are able to enter people's dreams. I mean, he leaves that very vague in comparison to everything else, and really just lets you get wrapped up in the experience. And I think that goes for his Batman movies also. He skips over certain details, knowing that the characters would probably figure that out without necessarily showing it. You could argue that, well, that's just poor storytelling. I say it's skipping over minor things. And in the case of these plot holes, I don't really think they ruin the movie, not by a long shot, because this movie is very well made, it's very well shot, it's excellently directed by Christopher Nolan, it's very well acted by its talented cast. The fight scenes and the chase scenes, the numerous action scenes are fantastic. The liberties they do take with these characters, having Batman be this cripple who is trying to move on, having Bane again as this sort of fascist liberator, having Catwoman as this. Well, actually, this is probably closer to the comics than any other Catwoman has been up to this point. So, props there, I guess. But all these liberties they take with these characters and all these risks, I think, pay off. I think there are definitely more positives to this movie than there are negatives. While I do think that it's not quite as good, and it's not quite as hard-hitting as the previous two, I don't really think there's any denying, for me anyway, that this is a very hard-hitting epic that caps off the Dark Knight trilogy with a bang. I think as movies, these function better than any live-action Batman movies before it. As movies, these are just so masterfully made. And if you don't like them because well, it doesn't really feel like a Batman movie, they just feel like Christopher Nolan just doing whatever he wants with the character, I say, well, it's called an interpretation. I mean, it is Christopher Nolan's interpretation of the character. And as far as I'm concerned, he really gets it. He really hits the nail on the head in a lot of places. And the differences in comparison to other iterations or more comic faithful interpretations, I can forgive, because the movies, in my opinion, are just that good. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest movie trilogies out there, or at least in recent memory. And yeah, go watch them. Go watch them, all three of them. All three of them were just fantastic. I don't really know where there is to go. Again, like I said in my Batman Begins video, WB will be very hard pressed to find a way to top this, unless Ben Affleck is given complete creative control to direct, write, and star in his Batman movie. Then I don't foresee WB being able to top Christopher Nolan's interpretation of Batman anytime soon.